But first, a study this week has revealed a rise in England as young as 8 trying to lose weight for children in England, with research suggesting that more than a quarter of children are on diets, including those who are of a healthy weight. Now, the survey of more than 34,000 children and teenagers published in the Archives of Disease in Childhood highlights a worrying issue. Now, I'm joined by nutritionist Priya too, and child psychologist Dr. Nikki Tepper to explore this further. Thanks for coming in. So, Priya, look, young children on diets, some as young as 8, and those of healthy weights, that's quite worrying, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely shocking, isn't it? We don't want to have children that young going on diets. When we think about the implications of this, we're thinking that they're potentially cutting out food groups that's going to affect their nutritional intake, it's going to impact their growth, puberty, how they achieve academically, also their psychological side. We want to be promoting people having an overall great relationship with food and their bodies. And I think this is really concerning that children this young are already starting to think about dieting.
Is this boys, girls? What ages? Is it yo-yo dieting? What sort of things is it?
Well, yo-yo dieting is the concern. If they start going on diets now and then that doesn't work, are they then going to go on more and more diets? The study actually showed it was more girls than boys, but that the gender gap is closing. So it's also boys as well.
Yeah. Nikki, what's the cause?
The obvious thing to do, obviously, is to point at social media, and it does play a role. The concept that thinner is better is one that's been around for years. It's not a new thing, but obviously with the increase in social media and young children having access to all sorts of platforms means that they're exposed more to that message. So they're hearing more and more and more, and I do think that plays a role. But we need to look at what other factors. I mean, you're looking not only at these sorts of environmental factors, but familial factors, social factors, cultural factors, psychological factors, all of which are playing a role in why these children are seeking different ways of maintaining a lower body weight when they don't need to, of course. And that there can be all sorts of different factors involved in that. It's important to start off looking at the family, but then, of course, looking at social and looking at the environment as well, not just social media.
So things, family, school, everything, basically everything that's around the child.
Everything. Well, I mean, look, it depends on the child, but yes, I mean, if you start at grassroots, if you think about, looking at the home, for example, what are you doing at home? How do you talk about food at home? What kind of role model are you setting for your children? What are meal times like? Are you planning them? Are you ordering every meal in? Do you sit down as a family? Do you allow phones at the table, or is the television on whilst you're eating? Or are you talking to your children? Are you talking about different food groups, which, you've already touched on?
And there'll be loads of parents watching that thinking, oh, yeah, don't do that, I don't do this. And actually, you can, as a parent, feel a bit beaten up, and there's so much advice out there. Priya, how should you talk to your child about food?
Well, I'm a mum, so I have 6 children in my house, and I would say the way that we role model is so important, making sure that we're giving good nutritional messages at the table. If your child says they don't like a food, then not pressuring them. Offering it, I think as the parents, we're there to provide a nutritious selection of foods, then it's up to the child to decide how much they have and what they're going to have. And we're there to expose them and to show them that we eat a nutrition balanced diet and talk to them about that. But it's not about forcing a child to go on a diet or forcing children to even eat certain foods. It's more around showing them how things can be enjoyed and role modeling that really great relationship with food and how we talk about our bodies as well. So we know from some other studies that how mums talk about their bodies very much impacts how girls then feel about their bodies later in life.
Okay, and is there a concern then that this leads to an unhealthy relationship with food in the child, and that could lead to eating disorders and things that are so much more serious?
Definitely. I work in eating disorders, and we're seeing more and more people coming through and children suffering. So that is very much the concern. If we start children dieting now and with that bad relationship with food and feeling negative about their bodies, then that certainly is going to predispose them to eating disorders later in life.
Yeah. So is this a parenting problem more than anything else then, Nikki?
I wouldn't call it a parenting problem, but certainly I think parents need to take a look at what's going on in the family home. Children diet for all sorts of reasons, and I certainly wouldn't want to say it's a parenting problem. But, the important thing is to communicate with your children, talk to them, look at what's going on in the family home. If your child is dieting and dropping weight at an alarming rate, have a conversation with them, ask them what's going on.
So my kids are older now. They're actually not kids anymore, 19 and 24. But I'm just thinking about when they were younger. If I'd have said something like, "Oh, I'm not going to have that cake tomorrow," or the cake's in front of me, I'm not going to have that cake because actually I'm feeling a bit full or whatever. Do they're sponges, aren't they, when they're young? And do they absorb all that sort of stuff? And should I not be saying that?
Well, I think the problem that we've got at the moment is this kind of binary good and bad thing. Yes, the study has come out about the dieting, but equally there's an alarming increase in childhood obesity as well. And I think what we're looking at is the role of food in society and how we talk about eating and how we talk about healthy eating and how we should be communicating healthy eating. Certain foods aren't good or bad. The idea is that we want to be promoting a balance.
Yeah.
And that's something that can start at home, not just at home, but also at school, with their friends and, as they're growing up, especially as they go through adolescence.
We're in a cost of living crisis. Many people are struggling. People will say it's really hard to get a really good, varied diet for their child. How can you do that if you are struggling?
We've got to think a little bit outside the box, I think, right now, don't we? So that might mean shopping in a different supermarket. It might mean focusing more on using frozen vegetables rather than fresh all of the time, and just having a little look around at what's on offer, being a little bit more creative with the way that you're cooking. And I think one of the major things is start to cook from scratch more. If you start to cook from scratch more, it's cheaper and you can provide nutritious, balanced meals.
And you said you had 6 kids. Maybe the 7th, I'll come round and have food with you sometime.
Sounds amazing.
Priya, Nikki, thank you.